In October 2000, an English seaside town was sent into an intense state of panic after a series of bomb threats towards the local customers of one of the biggest UK supermarkets were issued. The motive? To extort millions of pounds from Britain's giant retailer, all the while putting their customers' safety and lives at risk with the aid of letter bombs being sent to each registered Tesco club card member. It all started with a threatening letter that triggered a huge manhunt for the local police force, and the only true detail available to them was the terrorist who referred to themselves simply as Sally. Who was the terrorist known as Sally? And why was Sally specifically targeting the Tesco supermarket chain and their registered customers? Police and the residents of Bournemouth were left equally baffled as to the true identity of the elusive terrorist, and we uncover and explore some untold aspects of this case later in this video. Homemade explosives, letter bombs, coded messages and secret stakeouts. The Dorset police were in a race against time to save the lives of the innocent supermarket customers of Bournemouth. What was the lead up to the terrifying series of events, and just how was this campaign of terror orchestrated? Let's begin as we reveal the true identity of the Tesco supermarket bomber. Hello and welcome, or for some of you, welcome back. My name is Ben and you have reached the Curio Lounge today. Just a quick FYI before we get into this case, I post true crime and real mysteries videos here, so if that sounds like it might be your thing, please consider subscribing and tapping the notification bell so you don't miss my future videos. Also, be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts in this case, and a little like rating so I know that you've stopped by. With all of that out of the way, let's get right into the terrifying case of Sally, the Tesco supermarket bomber. Our story today takes us to the English seaside town of Bournemouth, which is situated in the south coast of the country 94 miles southwest of London. The biggest city in the county, Bournemouth is largely known for its miles of golden beaches with links to wider Dorset, including the stunning World Heritage Site, the Geographical coast. Close to the beaches lies Bournemouth town centre, a hotspot for finance, culture, education and sport, and across the outskirts, quaint coastal villages and quieter beaches can be found. Bournemouth is a hotspot for tourists and to this day is one of the wealthiest cities in all of England. However, in recent decades, Bournemouth has experienced a steady rise in crime rates, making it the most dangerous city in the county of Dorset, despite it having a small lower percentage of crime rates when compared to the rest of England. And so in the year 2000, Bournemouth experienced a bizarre and yet terrifying ordeal that left the city in a state of panic and disarray, all at the hands of Sally, the Tesco supermarket bomber. The campaign of terror was kickstarted by a single phone call to Tesco's security department in the August of the year 2000. This call was made by the proprietor of a Bournemouth kiosk who found a very unusual letter left in their photocopier by a customer that day. This was a threatening letter of extortion addressed to the supermarket retailing giant, signed off by the name Sally. The letter was a direct threat to the retailer, demanding large sums of money and warned of putting their customers in mortal danger should the company fail to meet the demands. The chilling document spoke of targeting Tesco customers with deadly letter bombs addressed directly to their homes. Curiously, the letter was headed "without prejudice," and the word prejudice was spelled incorrectly. The letter was forwarded straight to Dorset police, who at this time had no clue as to the identity of the author, only that it was signed off under the name Sally. Although police had to keep in mind regarding the gender, they referred to the author as Sally for the purposes of the investigation. Regardless of the true identity of Sally, the letter contained specific instructions on how Tesco were to deliver the money. Sally explained that Tesco were to produce versions of their store loyalty club cards that were programmed to contain monetary balances, all ready to be used in regular ATMs. These pre-programmed club cards were then to be included in the physical copies of the local newspaper, the Daily Echo, on a day of Sally's choosing. The Daily Echo was, and still is, Bournemouth's popular local newspaper, and at the time of this extortion had a viewership of tens of thousands of people. This means that once the newspaper is published and put on sale in stores, Sally would be provided with potentially thousands of club cards, each with the ability to withdraw a fortune of cash from ATMs. The instructions from Sally stated that each club card is to be loaded with the ability to withdraw £1,000. Sally even provided a secret PIN number so that only they could withdraw the vast amounts of cash. If each club card was used in this way, Tesco potentially stood to lose around £50 million in a single day, and Sally would be in line for one hell of a payout. A question that struck the police from day one was why Sally was targeting Tesco in particular. During this time in the year 2000, Tesco was experiencing record profits and significant expansion across the United Kingdom. Their expansion campaign at the time was very aggressive, and it seemed like their stores were everywhere you would turn. Also by this time, the growing supermarket giant faced many allegations and litigations in relation to their conduct, corporate policy, financial activity, customer service, food production, treatment of staff, and so much more. For these reasons, Tesco was featured heavily in the media at the time, so could Sally be carrying out their vendetta as a retaliation to these controversies? Police also had to consider the possibility that the extortion was being carried out by a disgruntled ex-employee, perhaps someone who was dismissed from their job and still carries a grudge against the company. Another option considered by the police that a heist this elaborate had to be carried out by an organised criminal gang and not just a single individual named Sally. It was even very possible that this was being carried out by an activist political group using Tesco's high profile to jumpstart their cause. Police were very open to all of these possibilities at this point. The police then had their first potential breakthrough in the case when on August 30th, 2000, Tesco received a second threatening letter from Sally. However, although the actual content was exactly the same as the first, this second letter had an obvious difference. It actually arrived fire damaged, as if someone had attempted to destroy it before it was delivered. Remember, the first letter to Tesco police seized was discovered in a kiosk photocopier, so the thinking was that this fire-damaged letter was the copy Sally sent to Tesco in the post. Since the letter received by Tesco was fire-damaged, had Sally had second thoughts before sending it and attempted to destroy that batch of post? Perhaps Sally realised that they had left the original in the photocopier, or maybe Sally thought that they had been seen posting the letter. Either way, police came to the realisation that the sender would have tried to set the postbox on fire after posting it. Whether Sally was aware of this or not, this provided police with a strong lead in the case. Ironically, Sally's attempt to destroy the evidence had only provided police with further clues. All investigators had to do was identify any postboxes that had recently been set alight in Bournemouth or the surrounding areas. After a few simple inquiries, police identified a postbox that had indeed been set on fire, and it could not have been closer to the heart of the investigation. A postbox outside Bradpole Road Post Office on the corner of Bradpole Road and Castle Lane West had recently been the target of arson. Someone attempted to torch the contents of this postbox. Police breathed a sigh of relief at this point, because it seemed that Sally's campaign of extortion was abandoned before it even got going. Police collected all of the forensic evidence they could from the postbox and were thankful that Sally's vendetta against Tesco was now over. However, the high spirits of the police were later shot down in flames when Tesco received a third letter from Sally, a letter very different to the original, a complete game changer for this whole case. Sally was now taking their extortion operation and cranking it up a few gears. The principle of the demands were the same as stated in the first letter. Tesco club cards were to be set up with £1,000 of funds each, and with the ability to dispense these funds in one go from any ATM. Sally's new letter made it very clear that mail bombs were made and ready to be sent to Tesco's registered club card members if demands were not met. Sally stated to Tesco that if they failed to comply, the mail bombs will be sent directly to their customers' home addresses, and if that wasn't enough, the bombs would simply get bigger and more devastating. Tesco's customers in Bournemouth and the surrounding areas were now in severe mortal danger. However, embedded in Sally's demands, a serious flaw was spotted by the police. Even if each Tesco club card was loaded with £1,000, no ATM in the country would allow withdrawals of that value in one day, let alone in one transaction. Sally's grand plan just simply would not work. Due to the seriousness of Sally's threats to the general public, the police were concerned that Sally may begin to think that they were ignoring the situation. Police wanted to respond and make Sally aware that there was a serious problem with the logic of their grand scheme. Just as Sally demanded in the letters, police turned to the Daily Echo as their platform of communication, namely the personal ads section of the popular local paper. On the 6th of September 2000, the the police posted a personal ad with a contact number directed at Sally, in the hope that the sinister extortioner would be tricked into making contact with the police and exposing their true identity. The investigation, codenamed Hornbill, was stepping up due to the flaws in Sally's plans and the serious threat to the general public now looming over the city of Bournemouth. Around 100 officers were enlisted from across the whole of Dorset Police, and lead investigators took the decision to not divulge the nature of the investigation to their assisting colleagues. The assisting police colleagues were not allowed to know the true nature of the investigations, and for a very good reason. 10 years prior, in 1990, the Heinz Food Company was a victim of blackmail by the extortioner Rodney Whitchelo. Whitchelo attempted to extort millions of pounds from the food company giant by spiking supermarket baby food with glass fragments and caustic acid, a substance used in bleach products. Whitchelo demanded millions from Heinz, and when demands were not met, he purchased jars of baby food from various supermarkets, laced them with glass and poison before returning them to store shelves. During this deadly extortion campaign, in cooperation with supermarkets across the country, Heinz had no other option but to withdraw all products from stores, causing the food company giant to lose over £27 million in revenue. When police finally tracked down and caught Whitchelo, they made a further chilling discovery. Their perpetrator was in fact a detective sergeant with Scotland Yard. In 1990, Whitchelo was sentenced to 17 years in prison. He was released 8 years early in 1999. Could extortioner Sally also be a police officer? For all investigators knew, Sally could even be Whitchelo himself returning to his blackmailing ways. The language in Sally's letters could easily have been written by a police officer. Even the phrase "without prejudice," albeit spelled incorrectly, was seen as almost courtroom jargon. So Dorset Police were not taking any chances. Police not only had to keep the details of Operation Hornbill confidential from fellow officers, they also had to keep a very open mind as to the true identity of Sally. Regardless of their true identity, Sally had suddenly entered radio silence and failed to respond to the police messages published in the Bournemouth Echo. 2 weeks had passed, and on the 9th of September 2000, police held a meeting to discuss and assess the realistic threat to the public that Sally posed, considering the fact that no mail explosives had actually been sent to Tesco customers. Sally had actually not yet acted upon their grave threats as expressed in the letters. However, right in the middle of the meeting, police received the most devastating news. An incendiary device had been exploded in the face of a Bournemouth resident while she was opening her mail that morning. 70-year-old Jean Evans, who had just returned from intensive care about a week prior, suffered serious injuries to her face during the explosion. Sally had now made the outlandish threats a cold reality, and it seems that an innocent Tesco customer was the first victim, just as Sally had promised around 3 weeks prior. A letter bomb had indeed exploded in the face of a Bournemouth resident, and as she was being rushed to hospital, police immediately scrambled to the address. Also dispatched to the scene were an explosives ordnance disposal unit to secure the situation and confirm exactly which type of device was used. As the remnants of the explosive device was thoroughly examined, it transpires that Sally was a resourceful bomb maker. The incendiary device was crafted using a combination of a compact disc jewel case, gunpowder, string, and a pin that triggered off a party popper to ignite the explosive material inside. Whilst this particular device was capable of serious injury, it was not likely to be fatal. However, police kept in mind the content of Sally's letters that threatened bigger and more devastating bombs to follow if demands for cash were not met. Police immediately alerted the local Royal Mail sorting offices to be on the lookout for any suspicious packages that resembled the one opened by Sally's first innocent victim. Soon enough, police received a call from Royal Mail reporting several very similar packages in their offices ready to be delivered. Based on Sally's threat to up the stakes, police were taking no chances. The bomb squad were again sent in to examine the threat and inspect the packages found in the local sorting office. To preserve as much forensic evidence as possible, the letter bombs had to be defused with a steady hand. Not as simple as it sounds, the bomb squad's best option was to cut the party popper string away from the trigger that is supposed to ignite the explosives contained within. However, as the bomb squad was securing the explosive packages, Sally was pushing the situation to the next level. Sally had sent more threatening letters, only this time they were addressed to Tesco customers' homes. Astonishingly, the letters warned the customers that they were observed shopping at the local Tesco supermarket, followed home, and were at risk of receiving letter bombs at their place of residence. Sally had really taken things to the next step, and the concerns of the police also escalated. Sally was now making direct threats to the innocent Tesco customers and had already proved capable of distributing devastating explosives in the mail. The police and Tesco did their best to reassure the local community that they were doing all they could to minimise the risk to their safety, and police even issued a nationwide warning just in case Sally decided to take the extortion further afield. However, when piecing together the facts, it was clear to the police that they were dealing with a Bournemouth local. All of Sally's operations had taken place in the local Tesco, used a local postbox, and local Bournemouth residents were being directly targeted. It's well established that criminals tend to commit their crimes within areas that are familiar to them, using their geographical knowledge to their advantage. With the assistance of a geographical profiler, police concentrated their surveillance within the most likely catchment areas. As it turns out, there was one area in particular that police were convinced they should monitor around the clock, that being the postbox outside Bradpole Road Post Office on the corner of Bradpole Road and Castle Lane West. Undercover officers posing as workmen placed the postbox under round-the-clock recorded surveillance, in the hope of catching Sally in the act of posting the devastating letter bombs. In addition to this, the police suggested to the head of security at Tesco to actually load a number of their club cards with the cash requested by Sally and then place all ATMs in Bournemouth under tight surveillance in a bid to catch Sally in the act. Tesco's security department were less than keen on this concept, as their policy on such matters stated that they would never pay out to extortioners. However, Tesco were also very aware that their customers were in grave danger at the hands of Sally, but the police had very valid reasons to believe this strategy to catch Sally would work. A few years prior, in the mid-1990s, extortioner Edgar Pearce attempted an almost identical stunt against Barclays Bank and another retail giant, Sainsbury's. Pearce, dubbed the Mardi Gras Bomber, demanded cash to be dispensed in a similar manner to Sally's plan, through a series of withdrawals at ATMs across London. Pearce was apprehended after police placed hundreds of ATMs on constant surveillance within a specific radius. Could the same tactic help police track down Sally? However, it would seem that Sally was becoming increasingly impatient, because when the police and Tesco were debating whether they should employ the same tactic or not, Sally raised the game even further. In mid-October of 2000, Sally sent Tesco yet another threatening letter, only this time the threats contained therein were far more sobering than the previous correspondence. Sally explained that pipe bombs were now ready to be planted and detonated in the gardens of random Tesco customers. Such devices are capable of causing severe injury and loss of life. Based on the previous actions, police had no reason to disbelieve Sally's new threats. Clearly a competent bomb maker, all Sally had to do next was take the crafting to the next level. Not only were the threat levels now significantly raised, Sally's latest letter included a brand new twist on the extortion campaign. Provided was a secret code the police were expected to use when communicating with Sally in the Bournemouth Echo personals. Although very elaborate sounding, it now meant that police were able to tell Sally everything they needed to without Bournemouth Echo readers also following their conversation. Police were finally able to inform Sally how the plan to use Tesco club cards at ATMs was deeply flawed. In top secret, the editor-in-chief of the Bournemouth Echo granted advertising space in the paper so the police could openly communicate with Sally going forward. However, just days after the police published their latest message to Sally via the Bournemouth Echo, it would seem that the Tesco bomber had been captured on camera using the same postbox just off Bradpole Road, the very same postbox used in previous correspondence. Although police were convinced that the footage they retrieved was indeed Sally, the quality of the image and the weather interference on the night it was recorded meant that police were still no closer to unmasking the extortioner's true identity. After thousands of hours of recorded surveillance, the police were still in the dark with regards to Sally's true appearance. Well aware that the threats were becoming increasingly more serious, and that they were no closer in establishing any kind of identification, the police contacted Sally via the Bournemouth Echo a further time with a new approach. Since the concept of using Tesco club cards at ATMs was not feasible, the police suggested to Sally that the funds were provided by means of a cash drop in a specified location in the nearby area. It would seem that Sally sensed that this was an obvious trap laid out by the police and continued to demand that cash withdrawals were made possible by means of the Tesco club card. Despite the fact that this method was clearly unrealistic, Sally didn't believe the police and insisted that the cash was transferred via this original method. After this exchange of correspondence, Sally's letters then completely stopped. Police just were not convinced that their messages to Sally were being fully understood, and so there was the growing worry that the nail bombs mentioned in the most recent letters were going to be deployed to Tesco customers' homes at any given moment. 3 weeks later, in November 2000, Sally got back in touch with yet another threatening letter, and it seems that patience was rapidly wearing thin. This time, Sally issued the strict deadline of Saturday the 12th December 2000 for the police to provide the ability to withdraw large amounts of money using the pre-loaded cash cards. If demands were not met within a month, Sally issued the grave promise of detonating these pipe bombs in the homes of Tesco customers. With the deadline fast approaching, police were keen to try anything at this point to keep Sally's bombs at bay. Police did set up some modified Tesco club cards that had the ability to dispense large amounts of cash from any ATM. However, with there being over 25,000 ATMs across the United Kingdom and over 200 in the Bournemouth area alone, catching Sally in the act using these cash cards would not be a simple task. What Sally would not have known was that Tesco were poised to deactivate the cards once the first few started to be used. This meant that even if this heist was successfully pulled off, the payout would not end up being as high as Sally had hoped. At the same time, the police encountered a problem with their plan. Tesco informed the police that they were unable to produce the requested cards in time for Sally's specified deadline. Police were now desperate to buy some more time before Sally's next wave of terrorism began. Police communicated this with Sally using the secret coded language via the Bournemouth Echo with the hope of pushing the deadline back. They made it clear that they were willing to work with Sally, but needed more time to meet the demands. Barely a week before the original deadline was up, Sally displayed an obvious sign of impatience, and police received a further letter they hoped would never arrive. To their horror, the letter stated that a lethal pipe bomb had been left on the property of an innocent Tesco customer. Sally even provided a grid reference as to its location in the Ferndown area north of Bournemouth. However, this square kilometre contained 19 residential streets that included over 500 addresses. Hundreds of officers and bomb diffusers descended upon this area of Ferndown, and it was at this point that the extortion campaign was catapulted into the national media. Police began combing through the gardens in this large area in a bid to uncover and defuse any pipe bombs deployed by Sally. On the 7th of December 2000, just 3 days into the search for the deployed pipe bombs, police received yet another letter from Sally, and yet again, its content could never have been predicted. In this most recent letter, Sally instructed the police to stand down and that no pipe bombs were actually deployed. It transpired that Sally was playing with the police on this occasion. However, the police might not be so fortunate the next time. But not so fortunate for Sally, police actually had the postbox on Bradpole Road on constant covert surveillance the entire time, and the most recent letter was traced right back to that very same postbox. Police knew that they had captured Sally somewhere on their recorded video surveillance. However, as this was the lead up to Christmas on our popular mini high street, the postbox was used by over 100 different people on the same day as Sally. Police had many images of people using this postbox, however there was no way of confirming which one was the extortioner in question. Further to this, UK laws dictate that no one, not even the police, are allowed to intercept mail once it has been posted in a Royal Mail postbox. The only option for the police was to monitor the people using the postbox in the hope of tracking down the elusive Sally. During their extensive stakeouts of the postbox, police made a discovery that highlighted one of their worst fears. One of the users of the postbox was indeed one of their own, a local police officer stationed within Dorset Police. Based on their knowledge of police officer Rodney Whitchelo carrying out a similar extortion attempt and the language used in Sally's threatening letters, this individual became a significant person of interest for the Dorset Police. The officer seen using the postbox was intensely interrogated. However, it soon became abundantly clear that they had nothing to do with this crime whatsoever. This officer was completely innocent, and it was merely a coincidence that they were seen using the same postbox as Sally. Sally still remained completely unidentified at this time. Police eventually narrowed down their list of suspects by identifying users of the postbox one by one, and by the 17th of February 2001, they had managed to whittle down the number of suspects to just one individual. The one remaining user of the postbox was yet to be identified, and on their surveillance footage, the police noticed that this individual was carrying a petrol can whilst walking down the road. During this time, there was a petrol station situated at the end of this road. Police later retrieved CCTV footage from this service station to reveal a full visual of this individual. As shown on the tapes, the postbox user in question had purchased fuel at the petrol station and had paid for this purchase via a cheque. The bank account on the cheque was traced back to an unemployed 50-year-old male residing in the Kinston area of Bournemouth. The last to be identified postbox user was revealed to be Robert Edward Dyer. Armed with this information, police decided to carry out round-the-clock surveillance on Dyer in the hope that he would expose himself in the elaborate Tesco extortion campaign. Even after a lengthy covert stint of surveillance, Dyer, who had no previous criminal convictions, was observed visiting his elderly mother and running errands, all the while showing zero interest in the Tesco supermarket and did not even use the postbox on Bradpole Road. The surveillance revealed nothing that raised any police suspicion. To be sure, police decided to carry out their routine visit on Dyer as they had on other identified users of the postbox. This routine procedure involved interviewing their suspects and running software on their computer that searched for any files that mentioned the Tesco extortion campaign. On the afternoon of February 19th, 2001, police descended upon Dyer's home on Caroline Road, which was a modest bungalow in the ex-village of Kinston. As Dyer was questioned, officers carried out the scanning procedure on his computer found in another room. Investigators did not have to wait long until the software found matches relating directly to this case. It retrieved files that were actual exact copies of the extortion letters, all signed off, of course, under the name Sally. As police suspected for some time, Sally was in fact their number one suspect, Robert Edward Dyer. Dyer, who showed no emotion, no surprise and absolutely zero resistance, was swiftly arrested as a result of the chilling discovery in his home. Sally's 6-month rampage of terror had finally come to an end. In the coming days, police interviewed Dyer, who denied his guilt in the most lazy and yet bizarre manner.
What I can't understand at the moment is you can't remember sitting at the computer drafting this letter.
I don't understand it either, but that is the case.
You might not understand why you did it, but I think you remember doing it.
No. I don't understand either.
Whilst Dyer continued with his strange display of denial, police moved in on his house to carry out a full forensic search, and what they discovered only seemed to incriminate him even further. Hidden within Dyer's gas boiler, police retrieved some folded paper that transpired to be the secret coded language used to communicate with the police during the campaign of terror. The coded language was even in Dyer's handwriting. Then, police intercepted the last of Dyer's threatening letters in the post and even CCTV footage of him posting them in the postbox just off Bradpole Road. This CCTV footage was captured just 24 hours before his arrest. The final letters exactly matched the files found on Dyer's computer. Dyer had orchestrated this entire campaign of terror from his own property, composing and printing the letters from his bedroom, and making the explosive devices and bombs in his garden shed. Dyer worked for himself and himself only. However, as far as the police were concerned, several questions remained. Why target Tesco? Why the demand for free cash via their club cards, and why the use of the female alias, Sally? By means of intense police interrogation, Dyer eventually divulged the answers to these elusive questions. With no real vendetta against the supermarket giant Tesco, Dyer was inspired by the so-called Mardi Gras bomber we touched upon earlier, and the reason for Dyer's campaign of extortion was simply the financial struggle he was facing at the time. But what about the use of the fake female name of Sally? What was the real significance behind that name? Dyer eventually revealed that Sally was simply the name of a dog he once owned. Robert Edward Dyer appeared before the Crown Court on the 4th of May 2001 and pleaded guilty to 9 counts of blackmail and 1 count of common assault for the detonated letter bomb. Dyer was sentenced to 16 years in prison, however this was later reduced to 12 years as a result of an appeal. When passing sentence, Judge Christopher Clark justified his ruling to Dyer, stating, "You increase public anxiety by threatening bigger and more powerful bombs. You embarked on an evil campaign of public extortion, intimidation, and terror. You planned your crimes with devious cunning and meticulous care. The public anxiety about your activities was enormous." Dyer's motivation was purely a financial one, with absolutely no political motivations, and he was someone with no connections with Tesco whatsoever. It transpired that Dyer was seeking this large sum of ill-gotten money to fund the losses of his unsuccessful video shop business. In addition, police discovered that Dyer had raised his 2 teenage daughters after his wife had died as a result of self-cancellation in 1992, although the finer details of his wife's demise are not quite clear. Subsequently, as Dyer began his prison sentence, his 2-bedroom bungalow on Caroline Road was sold in June 2001 for £87,500. Although labelled by the police as an incredibly dangerous man, Dyer was released from prison early just 6 years later in 2007 under licence. This means that Dyer would have been released under certain conditions, and if those conditions were broken, he would be returned directly back to prison. Little is known publicly about Dyer's current whereabouts. However, I do have details regarding this, and I'm choosing not to publish them in this video for very good reasons. For example, although Dyer has been released from prison, he has still served his sentence for his crimes, and as long as he doesn't commit further offences, there's no need to expose his current whereabouts. We can only hope that he is aware of the sheer horror and panic he caused during his bizarre extortion campaign. Dyer has served his sentence, and we can just hope that he has taken his punishment on board and will never offend again. Well, here we are, we made it all the way to the end. Thanks so much for joining me in the Curio Lounge today. This was a very elaborate and convoluted case, and I really do appreciate you sticking with it. Remember, I post true crime and real mysteries videos here on a regular basis, so that sounds like it might be right up your street. Maybe consider subscribing today. Also, don't forget to leave me a comment regarding the case and a like rating so I know that you stopped by. Anyway, that's about it. I'm off now because there's some more terrifying true crime that needs to be covered, so I'll see you in the next one.